Hey, I'm Gretchen Bridgers of the Always a Lessons Empowering Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey there, Burned In Teachers. Welcome to episode 68 of the Burned In Teacher podcast. This is one part burnout and all other parts action, inspiration, and support for teachers dealing with burnout. I'm your host, Amber Harper, and I'm so grateful that you're here. And I hope that especially if you're listening to this in May of 2020, as we are smack dab in the middle of a global pandemic, that this episode finds you and your loved ones healthy and safe. And if you need a good, healthy dose of Burned In Teacher, this is the episode for you. Today, we're going to talk about never settling and the difference between never settling, being content, and accepting where you are. Because we get a lot of different nuggets of advice from people, right? So as we talk about these opportunities that we have to get to know ourselves better, take safe risks, all the things that I talked about in last week's episode. So in this episode, I'm going to take you through the steps you can take to kick settling to the curb, and we're going to reflect on all of the action that we've taken over the past 8 months, talk about the opportunity that you have to become a Burned In Teacher, and you're going to leave this episode with a huge smile on your face and a plan in your brain. Let's go. Welcome to the Burned In Teacher podcast. I'm Amber Harper, and the educators on this podcast are brave enough to share their stories of burnout with the world. On BIT, we get real, we get honest, and we take action. Action against the burnout with stories from burned out teachers, advice from experts, and actionable steps you can take today to beat the burnout and become a happier, more fulfilled human being. Let's get started. Have you ever been confused by some people telling you to be content or to accept things the way that they are and to be grateful, but at the same time being told that you should never settle? I mean, that's the title of today's podcast episode, right? Well, we're going to decipher this code and figure out the difference between all of these nuggets of advice and wisdom and take some steps to get you to take some action toward getting burned in, no matter how big or small those steps are for yourself. We're going to start by talking about the definitions of each of these 3 pieces of advice. So the first one is you need to be content. Okay? So let's talk about being content, right? What does that mean? So according to vocabulary.com, content means to feel satisfied and happy. So it has to do with being pleased and satisfied, feeling content, of course, and making someone else feel happy and at peace with things, right? I mean, that seems to me very closely aligned with the mission of Burned In Teacher, to be happier, more fulfilled, right? We want contentment. We want to feel happy. We want to feel satisfied, right? We'll come back to that. But the other thing I want to talk to you about is this advice to accept things versus settling. Okay, so radical acceptance, I love this definition by Marsha Linehan. Marsha says that radical acceptance is about accepting life on life's terms and not resisting what you cannot or choose not to change. Radical acceptance is about saying yes to life just as it is. It's not being okay with the way that things are, but it's saying this is something that I choose not to change or that I truly cannot change. And now what I love about this definition, and then what I'm going to tell you next, is that settling, I feel, can mean a lot of different things to different people. But now, according to, oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan of this woman. Her name is Brooke Castillo. She says settling is continuing something we know is not in our best interest without doing any evaluation or thought work. So that's staying in a negative emotion willingly or consciously giving up, shortchanging ourselves. It feels bad. It feels icky, right? But we continue to stay in that place because we either don't know what to do or we know what to do, but it's scary to do something different. Now, I would love your thoughts about these 3 different definitions, if you agree or disagree. So email me at support@burnedinteacher.com or DM me on Instagram @burnedinteacher. Let me know your thoughts. Because if I look at the difference between radical acceptance and settling, I feel like radical acceptance, and I've talked about radical acceptance before, has to do with things that you're seeing happen around you, such as the way a student is being raised or the way a principal is running a school. Okay? Versus settling, which is staying in that school if you are being directly affected by your principal or your district's choices that you know is not the cultural norm at a district nearby or even a school within the same district, but you're choosing to stay there because you're scared of taking that risk and maybe moving to a different school. Whereas with your student and the way they're being raised, you really cannot change the way that they have grown up. You can't change the way that their parents have grown up and the beliefs that they have about what a parent does and does not do to support their child. Does that make sense? Now, contentment, wanting to be satisfied and happy, that seems the goal, right? So when I take you through these steps of never settling, I want you to keep those 3 definitions in mind. It's something, like I said, that can be very confusing. How do these 3 things work together? Or do they work against each other? Are they all kind of the same? I feel like they all are very distinct and something that we should know the definite definition for before we start talking about what we want and what we want to change and what we don't want to change about our lives. So let's talk about never settling, shall we? Let's dive in. Let's just get into the meat of this, okay? So what does it mean to never settle and why is it important? Well, let me ask you this. Do you prepare for hardship? Hopefully the answer is yes. Do you wear a seatbelt? Do you participate in fire drills, safety drills at school, right? Even though they interrupt your perfect lesson, right? Do you have a savings account? I hope you do. Oh my goodness, this is such a great question for now. Do you have toilet paper stored anywhere in your house? Have you hoarded all the toilet paper? Or are you running out quickly, just like us, because we didn't hoard toilet paper? Preparing for future obstacles is not doomsday. In fact, Malcolm X said, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to sit scared in a corner and wait for bad things to happen. I want you to thrive. Okay. And that's what never settling is all about. It's about thriving through the hardship. And that's why for those burned in teachers out there who have read the ebook, who have gone through the burned in teacher training course, who are in the membership, you already had strategies and tactics and tools to help you through this hard transition, this immense crisis that we have been in, teaching from home, not seeing your students, having to teach virtually when you've never done it before, having to use technology when you've maybe not done it before. You had tools and strategies to help you to cope and help you to thrive, or at least feel like you can take the necessary steps to just do what needs to be done and even practice some radical acceptance. I can't change this, but I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. So preparing for future obstacles does several things, okay? Preparing for hardship, crisis, challenges, knowing your action plan for not if, but when things get hard, okay? It eliminates overwhelm. It creates the clarity you need to move forward. It helps you to generate focus. It helps you to support your established priorities. It encourages you to initiate lasting change. I hope all of this sounds familiar, Burned In teachers, because these are the action steps in the burned in process. So when you start to experience crisis or an immense change, or you're going through a global pandemic, or something happens personally, it's important that you know what your action plan is. So if you refuse to settle and stay in a place of frustration, anxiety, and that feeling of ickiness, right? Then you'll get burned in. And never settling is all about when you come across a hardship, when a wrench gets thrown in your plans, when life happens, that you will begin where you are. You're already farther along on this journey than you were before you started. Whether you started listening to this podcast last week, last month, last year, you know what it means to be a burned-in teacher. You know that you stop and think about how you got to this place and what is challenging you. You think about understanding your teacher brand. How would someone with my core values and my mission statement, who wants to serve these people, who has this brand, how would they handle this situation? Because we're humans, right? So I mean, for me, I went to college originally to be a nurse. I don't know if you know that. You probably don't know that about me. And I missed getting into nursing school after my first semester, my first year, I can't remember, by 1/100th of a point. And thank God, in a life or death crisis situation, I lose my mind. I can't think straight. Okay? Now, thank goodness for most of us, we have not been put into a position like that as a teacher. But what we can do is we can prepare for those hardships that come our way. The student who is disruptive that gets put into our class in, after 2 weeks after school has started, or, our principal that we love moves to another district or another school and gets replaced with a principal who is not quite who the other principal was. Okay? Those types of hardships, a global pandemic, right? Teaching from home when you had never had the desire to do so. How would you handle that with the brand that you have adopted as your own? Reflecting on your challenges, assessing what is challenging you, why it's challenging you, and focusing on solutions rather than the problem. Nurturing your strengths, thinking about what you're naturally good at, but also thinking about what habits do you have that nurtures those strengths, or do they take away from those strengths? What do you do daily that makes you better and prepares you to grow? Okay, I'm talking about some keystone habits like, are you taking care of your body? Do you know where things are? Do you have a routine that supports your wellness and the wellness of your family and your growth? Okay, then extending your reach and possibilities. Have you gone back to mindless movie binging instead of continuing to focus forward? Now, I know a couple of weeks ago I put out an episode about how the trauma of the COVID-19 crisis could be affecting you and what you can do about it. We all need downtime. We all need mindless binging time. But if that's all you've fallen back into, mindless scrolling through Instagram, feeling crummy about yourself because of all the things that you're seeing teachers are doing, whether or not they're real, okay? But thinking about, or am I using this as an opportunity to grow? Think about last week's episode, the benefits of burnout. Are you looking at this quarantine and your burnout as an opportunity to do something different? All right. How are you extending your reach and possibilities? How are you advocating for yourself and other teachers who are suffering with the same thing you're suffering with? Determining your long-term goals. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want next fall? What do you want a year after that? What do you want by the end of this school year? Especially if you're teaching virtually, how do you want to feel? What do you want for yourself? That's up to you. That's on you. And the sooner you know that and realize that, the quicker you can start initiating lasting change, which was last month. Thinking about your weekly, daily, hourly intention and discipline, what you're doing every day to bring you closer. It could be tiny steps. They don't have to be monumental. They don't have to be groundbreaking. You don't have to post about them on Instagram every day. What are your goals? What are you doing to take steps towards them? Okay? And that, my friend, is never settling. Never settling for an unfulfilled, overwhelmed, anxious life that you are in and just accepting as your forever reality. So now it's time to reflect. You know the steps. B, begin where you are. U, understand your teacher brand. R, reflect on your challenges. N, nurture your strengths and your habits. I'm adding habits in there. It's so important to have healthy habits. E, extend your reach and possibilities. D, determine your long-term goals. I, initiate lasting change. N, never settle. When things start to get hard, you start at B again because you're further along than you were when you first went through this cycle, this process. Okay? So what type of burnout were you experiencing at the beginning of this school year or 2 months ago? Compare the teacher that I'm talking to today to the teacher that you were 6 months ago, or maybe even last week. Tell me about the differences. Okay? Which step made you feel like the light bulb went off for you? What are you most proud of as a result of the work that you've done while working through these steps, while listening to these episodes? What would you say to a teacher who is struggling with burnout right now, especially in the middle of this isolating quarantine? What would you say to them? What advice would you take from this podcast or from what you've learned or from the ebook? What would you say to them? And finally, if you feel like you're slipping back into old patterns or ways of thinking and back into burnout, what will you do first? What's your action plan? What are you going to do? Because from all of this, I hope that you've learned that you are 100% responsible for you and your choices and what you do when this episode's over, and what you do tomorrow morning, and what you do next year. That's 100% on you. Now, with all of this knowledge, with all of this understanding, right? I have 3 things I want you to do. Number 1, I want you to download this free chapter of the Burned In Teacher ebook. Now, the ebook itself is going away because Hacking Teacher Burnout is coming out in 2020, but you can still download the free chapter. I'm following through with my promise to you that each month you're going to get a freebie. And this month in May of 2020, the freebie is Chapter 8 of the Burned In Teacher Training ebook, Never Settle. So go to burnedinteacher.com/never and get your free chapter. The second thing I want you to do, if you have not taken the teacher burnout quiz yet, especially in the last 3 weeks, I've completely revamped it to make sure that it is reaching teachers where they are, teaching virtually in the middle of this global pandemic and meeting your needs. So go to burnedinteacher.com/burnout quiz and take this 3-minute or less, probably not even 3 minutes, 6 questions. Be honest, and you'll get your result as burned and bored, burned and over it, or burned and unbalanced, and possibly even not burned out, just need a slight adjustment. Okay? The third thing is, after you download the free chapter or you share it with a friend and you take the teacher burnout quiz and you share it with a friend, I want you to go to burnedinteacher.com/waitlist because I've got a free 4-part video training series that's happening in just a week or 2. And it is going to change your life, my friend. If you think listening to these Burned In Teacher podcast episodes is changing your life, then this is really going to step up your burned in game. Okay, so go to burnedinteacher.com/waitlist. We'll get you on the waitlist and you'll get more details about the training that's coming very, very soon. I cannot wait to share it with you. By the way, have you joined our Burned In Teacher Facebook community? If you haven't, go to community.burnedinteacher.com. Oh my gosh, I have so many things for you to do today. And every single one of these things is going to get you further along in your journey out of burnout, and it's going to help you to never settle. So those questions I asked you earlier, those reflection questions, that's the safe place where you can go to answer them. That's where you can go to seek support when you're struggling. That's where you can go and say, this is happening to me. What do I do? Or this is how I feel. What should I do? And you are going to be met with hundreds of teachers who want to support you and want you to get burned in and want you to thrive, not just survive through this one life that we have. Okay, so I know I gave you 4 things to do, 4 action steps to take, in addition to reflecting on where you are now versus where you were at the beginning of the Burned In Teacher podcast, season 3. But it's all worth it, and it all flows together. These are not different things. They all will help you on your journey out of burnout as a burned in teacher. So stay tuned because next week I have even more goodness coming your way to help you as we move into our summer, even though we're teaching from home still, most of us, right? As we move into our summer, I have a lot of opportunities for you to become a burned in teacher. Next week is going to be another amazing episode to help you on that journey. So until then, take a deep breath, because you just took another step to becoming a burned-in teacher. Stay home, stay safe, burn on. If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, you can head over to burnedinteacher.com where you can access the entire vault of Burned In Teacher podcast episodes and more information about ways I want to help you go from burned out teacher to burned in human. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would be so grateful if you would head over to iTunes and leave a review and a rating about the Burned In Teacher podcast. Until next time, take a deep breath, because you just took another step to becoming a burned in teacher. Burn on.